We can now start our conference. I call Mr. Cavaglion. Alberto is a member of our scientific committee, and during the conference we're going to know all the members of the scientific committee as well as the members of the research group that supported the project over the years. And tomorrow morning we're going to have the welcome of the president of the architects of the province of Modena, and in particular, as far as the structuring of the call for tenders, we're going to be supported by several architects, both at local, regional, and national level. We have tried to get started in the best possible way, and especially with Alberto Cavaglion, we have agreed upon several things right up from the start. And Alberto 2 years ago made a very wise speech at a conference on the same topic, saying that we had to try this way, but only after setting up a series and deep cultural project defining avenues of research and paving the way for such work. So, Alberto, let's get back to that point in time and let's resume that kind of notion. So 3-4 years ago we said ourselves, let's have a try. Thank you very much, Fausto, for letting me open such an important conference on a project that I've been following very closely for many years. Lately I couldn't follow things as I would have liked, but still I've always tried to question myself about the notion of memorial sites. And 10-15 years ago every place was considered as a memorial site, but I think that over the last few years there was a change, and that notion has been recently resumed. Unfortunately, there was a quite large debate on that about Prodapio. Well, I must confess that as far as Nonantra is concerned, fortunately the situation is different, and in particular Nonantala hasn't got such a heavy burden to carry. So no controversy has ever existed about Nonantala and its past. So that said, we certainly see a regain of interest towards memorial sites. But in particular, I would like to emphasize two possible dangers that may affect the history of Nonantala. Considering what has been done over the last few years and considering this conference, I think that no misuse could be done about the notion of memorial site. But still, there is a threat, and allow me to say that there is a quite widespread danger having to do with modern historiography, especially when it comes to Second World War related topics. And this is what I call the metonymic danger. So when people take a part to express a whole. In modern historiography, there is a danger to tell the history of the Second World War as a part that represents the whole is often underestimated. The part that you want to recall is positive, so the good, the writers, but also if we refer to the negative part, so the perpetrators. Generally speaking, in contemporary historiography, there is this trend to separate, individual parts as representative of a whole. This applies to deportation history, resistance history in part, and most of all on civilian wars. So there are some reconstructions that sort of consider a part for the whole. Political and racial deportation, I tell a part and I delude myself of telling the whole story, or better, the whole history. Actually, it doesn't work like that. Well, in particular, the Neanderthal story, since its very beginning, and in particular the Villa Emma history, considering all the work that has been done, well, is miles away from this danger, unless people attempt to transform these specific history into the big history, the whole history, the complete one. But still, there are always shadows and lights. It is extremely important, especially if talking to young people. We should never ever make people think that a part accounts for the whole. And secondly, considering the beautiful title that you chose for this conference, and especially considering how things have evolved, I must confess that constructing a memorial site in front of a real memorial site makes me think another thing. That is about these in front of. Because being in front of a memorial site is not like being inside a memorial site. So in front of has a specific meaning when it comes to monuments specifically. I was talking to Fausto about this, and I told him that probably the best thing to do would be to underscore the symbolic value of this being in front of something, being in front of an event. The French say face à, other vis-à-vis. English say in front of. So you are in front of something and you look at something, but you're not inside a thing. And somehow you can keep some certain sort of distance, of detachment, and maybe you can look even better. Because sometimes when you take a distance, you can see things much better than those who are inside things. Literature is full of virtuous uses of the expression in front of, especially the risorgimento memories are full of positive uses of these in front of preposition. So you can stay in front of history without being too much involved in a way that could make you being biased. Secondly, we need to consider also a positive use of the opposite notion. You can stay in front of something, but also keeping your back to that, the anarchic socialist tradition in Tuscany and in central Italy. I always think about a beautiful cathedral in Massa Marittima. Well, was somehow sort of connected to a Garibaldi statue, but Garibaldi statue doesn't face the cathedral, but its back faces the cathedral. So again, being in front of has several meanings. In the epigraphy of the If This Is a Man, Primo Levi says, well, your children will turn your face to you. So if you do not remember, your children will turn their faces somewhere else. So this is a very intriguing concept. And certainly this is also a decision that was made because of practical reasons. So, I mean, here there was a need to do something else because the difficulty was turned into an opportunity, into virtue, and this is exactly the case of Villa Emma. So, this memorial site will be built in front of Villa Emma. So, but it's still very important to think over this notion and try to make the most of this specific logistics situation. So all the things that have been said so far are very important, and also what Mrs. Bucky said in the previous edition of this conference. Well, and certainly all the work that has already been carried out is perfectly in line with this inclusive attitude that is against metonymic approaches, because it's not really about telling single stories that are considered as epitomizers of the whole story. Not at all. Well, probably one of the main tasks of this project is really about getting together a marginal history with big historic issues. Alberto, what you said is totally true. And we also had to go with some practical problems. But still, this in front of is a deeply cultural topic. There is the demon of identification, but that belongs usually to silly and stupid people. But that said, we decided to adopt this observation point, keeping in mind the lost opportunities, because in other similar situations, some people hesitated and had a different fate and destiny. Maybe they had a memorial site, but then they did horrible things with that, and they had unlucky ideas about changing the historical site, regardless of what those sites represented and how they were. Well, we personally also tried to have a look at the historic destiny of the building of Villa Emma, not only considering all the people who went through it, and there were some residential sort of transits, and Dallas was paying rent. And then after the war, the facility was radically changed, including its internal structure. And oddly enough, the restoration that was made by the current owners somehow was made well done, because it was based on the historic memory of the architectural building, while brought back the villa, but somehow got rid of any possible historic references. So what you said is paramount, but that also links up with the way you question yourselves. I mean, we should always start from history and research and study, even when the memorial site is there. I mean, history should always be the starting point. But what do you think of that? What's your take on that? Well, certainly when it comes to a site, we need to consider its physical features. I'm persuaded of the fact that the physical features of a place, and this is a very personal opinion, are not so important when faced with a history that talks through text and books and other things. So the physical traits are not that important. And if we consider this story, it's not so far from the objective history, and especially when you showed me the library of the Villa Emma Boys and Girls, we have a book heritage that is small but really meaningful. And that by itself raises a number of methodological issues. Future generations may get a lot from that. When you're forced to escape, you can bring something with you, but you have to make a selection. And these choices are extremely important. And again, this book selection certainly does us more, much more than the architectural structure of a building, and without even mentioning the diaries and memories. So probably the memorial site category is tricky, is dodgy, it's not clear, it's not a neat category with defined parameters and within a well-defined perimeter. It's very hard to define a memorial site. If I had to explain to a high school student what is a memorial site, I would fail. I would not be able to do it, I must confess it. So it's much easier to talk about literature, to explain something else, or to explain what a grave is. And yesterday I was in Custoza, where, you have these containers with these areas where bones are preserved. And, well, actually, if you think about that, these are quite scary places where bones are conserved and preserved, but still, it is a well-defined place. So the heart of the Medicis is a memorial site somehow. And Cuore, the book by De Medicis, and Pinocchio by Collodi is also a memorial site somehow. So again, this is a quite open definition. We should not get lost in sterile and contradictory definitions that are not that meaningful. And again, this is my own take, and personally, I think that anything that would be built in front of the villa should have a multifaceted structure without trying to be trapped in a fixed definition.